Penguins forward Bryan Rust got a bit spicy during an interview on Wednesday with Ninja, and Pat and I are going to get a bit spicy on this show right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes. You can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Damp. You can follow him on Twitter at SynonymForWed, and you can follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. Of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen/watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. So Bryan Rust had quite a bit to say during a Wednesday interview with Twitch streamer Ninja. For those that do not know who Ninja is, he is a very popular video game streamer on Twitch. He does stuff on YouTube. He's done stuff on other platforms as well. And in summary, he blew up during Chapter 1 of Fortnite. He still streams the game to this day. The game is not nearly as good right now as it used to be back in the day, but I digress. I'm not going to go into a massive rant about Fortnite, even though I still play the game quite often. But he was a guest, Bryan Rust that is, on Ninja's sports podcast with his two brothers. And they were talking about a whole bunch of different things relating to the NHL. And one of the questions Rust was asked was about whether the Penguins would have beaten the Rangers if they had gotten in over the Washington Capitals. And Rust said with full confidence that he thinks they would have beaten the Rangers. Now, Bryan, I admire your confidence, to say the least. I think you're wrong, but I at least admire the confidence in saying that. I know it pissed off the fine folks in New York, but honestly, what doesn't piss off the fine folks in New York at this point? But I just admire him being confident in the team, even though they didn't get in. That said, I still don't think he probably should have said it. I think that's probably something you keep to yourself just because the Penguins did not get in the playoffs and the Capitals did. And yes, I know the Capitals got swept and the Penguins maybe would have put up a better fight than that. And Rust even said the Red Wings, he thinks, would have put up a better fight than the Capitals, but that's still just something you probably want to keep to yourself overall. Again, I admire the confidence. I admire him saying it, but just maybe next time, keep it to yourself.
I have a lot of thoughts on this, and I'm going to try to keep them as concise as I can because it's pretty far-ranging for me at this point. One, like you said, riling up Rangers fans is not that hard anymore. I have been the victim of Twitter pylons multiple times in this postseason alone, including having some fun with Rust's quote earlier today, just kind of saying that I think he's right and he should have said it louder, even though I'm joking. I'm with you. I don't think they beat the Rangers. Then there's the other thing for me before I get into the actual hockey of it. The NHL needs more of this, man. Like, this is what makes sports fun. Like, I say this all the time. At the end of the day, sports are still entertainment. Yes, it's competition at the highest level. Yes, it's elite athletes who have worked their entire lives to reach the pinnacle of the sport. But as an entire overarching entity, it's still entertainment. And you look at one of the biggest leagues in the world and the second biggest league in the United States, it's the NBA. And this is what these guys do all the time. They go at one another all the time, whether it's podcasts, interviews, Twitch, Instagram Live, you name it. But that drama is what brings people in. You want to see how teams and players respond to getting trash talked away from the court. And in the NHL, it's so vanilla. It's so boring. It's, you know, oh, we like those guys. We respect their game and we think they're a great team, but we're a great team too. And we're going to do our best. Like, we need more we need, like, to borrow a term from wrestling, we need more heels. We need more guys who are going to.
He's being a good villain, I think.
Yeah. Guys are going to grab the mic and say, like, nah, we would have beat you, but I digress on that anyway. Into the hockey of it, I do actually understand his logic. Like, there is something to be said for teams that match up well against one another. And I do think the Penguins matched up pretty well with the Rangers, all things considered, this season. But at the end of the day, he hit on something that's very true. The Penguins' power play, to use his words, was trash all season long. And we have seen especially with the New York Rangers in this postseason, special teams plays a gigantic factor in success or failure in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I don't think after game 82, a switch would have magically been flipped and this power play would have figured it out. So I do think they would have put up a better fight. I do think it wasn't the worst matchup for the Penguins, but at the end of the day, I keep saying it, this Rangers team is a wagon, and there was no world where the Penguins were going to beat them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Penguins maybe would have won a game, maybe two against the Rangers, but they were not going to win that series at all. I mean, you saw how good the Rangers were in the playoffs in these first two rounds and how still they're playing pretty well in the conference final. I think the Panthers have been the better team through these first four games, but this is still one heck of a series. More on that a little bit later in the show. But the Rangers literally walked through an entire series against the Capitals. They were destroying the Hurricanes for the first three games of that series, for the Hurricanes at least made it a series later on, but the Rangers were still the better team over the Hurricanes. I don't think the Penguins were going to go in there and beat this Rangers team 4 out of 7 times. And I do like how honest Rust was while discussing the power play. I think that was at least a shot at Todd Reirden for how bad the power play was. You can maybe argue that it was a shot at some of the other core players, but I think it was mostly a shot at Reirden just because they finished 31st in the league in power play percentage. And he even said, yeah, if we had our special teams in order, I think we could have given them one heck of a fight. I mean, sure, just because I think the Penguins at 5-on-5 match up a bit better against the Rangers than other teams, but I don't know if I would fully trust the Penguins penalty kill even against that red hot Rangers power play. I know the Penguins PK was pretty decent throughout the season. It was a top 10 unit for most of the season, but would I rely on it to really shut down that Rangers power play? Probably not. And I'm sure as hell not going to rely on the Penguins power play to score against the Rangers penalty kill, which has been one of the best penalty kills in the Stanley Cup playoffs to date. So I think he was just a little bit off with some of his comments, but I also think he was brutally honest with some of them as well.
And then one of the other things I left out of my little mini rant there was, what else is he supposed to say? Like, is he supposed to come out and be like, yeah, actually our team sucks and we didn't deserve to be in and we're not going to beat anybody. We're awful. We're one of the worst teams in the league. No, he's going to go up there and fight for his boys and defend his boys. And it's what you and I have talked about this off season, his maturation into becoming a leader on this group with this group. And he's not gonna go on the most followed Twitch streamer's account and say, actually, my team sucks. There's nothing exciting about it, because that's the other thing too. This is a way to be an ambassador for the sport, because of all the people that follow Ninja on Twitch, not many of them are probably hockey fans. This is not a very popular North American sport. Yes, you and I and our listeners, we kill ourselves with this team. We pour over everything and we look for every piece of content with hockey, but we are the top 1% of the 1% when it comes to fans, because not everybody does that. So if he goes up there and says, hey, like, you see how there's this team making their way through the Stanley Cup playoffs, it was the best team in the regular season, my team could have taken them on, that's going to pique some interest. People are going to go, you know what, maybe I should check out this Bryan Rust guy in the Pittsburgh Penguins in the National Hockey League. So in aggregate, I think it's a good thing what he did, even if it's a little silly and it riled up a bunch of people. But in the aggregate, when you're trying to grow the sport, get new eyes on it, this is a way to do it.
Right. I mean, it is a good villain arc overall, and I think that's going to make these Rangers-Penguins matchups even better for next season. I can't believe I'm even saying that, because those matchups right now are must-watch TV. I think even next year it's going to be even more must-watch TV overall. He also went into who one of his most hated teams are, and that's the Florida Panthers. He said because they have a bunch of ratty players, and when he was asked to explain that, he said, yeah, it's a bunch of players that take some cheap shots after the whistle and so on and so forth. And it's like, well, Brian, don't be surprised if this front office tries to copy a little bit of what the Panthers do, because the Penguins, let's be honest, they need more of those type of players. They have one in Bunting, but I think they could use another one or two. We've discussed that a few times on the show during the offseason. And I know he may not like the Panthers because of that, but I think he's going to grow to like the Penguins even more if Kyle Dubas and company go out there and get a player or two like the Panthers have.
It's the classic guy you hate when you play against them and you love them when you play with them. And We've been saying it all off season. We're in pretty much agreement on it. They need to copy that blueprint a little bit. They don't need to become the Florida Panthers. They don't need to stock the system full of rats, because we know how this organization operates. They love their top end talent. They love being a team that can score, but they do need to get back to some of the ways they were in 16, 17, and 18, where, if you're going to play the Pittsburgh Penguins, you're in for a long night. Your defensemen know that there's always going to be somebody throwing the body on the forecheck. You know that if you're going to try to carry it through the neutral zone, you're going to pay a price. The front of your own net is going to be a war zone, because somebody is always going to be there trying to impede your goalie and move you and goad you into a penalty. Penguins need a little bit more of that rattiness in their lineup. And I think, like you said, if this front office goes out and gets a couple of those guys, Bryan Rust will probably become good friends with them.
I definitely think so as well. He also discussed quite a few other topics on the show, but if you want to check that out, you can go to Ninja's Twitch stream. I think it's at like the 5.5 hour mark, timestamp, give or take. Before that, it's just a bunch of Fortnite plays. So if you want to watch Fortnite turn into GTA Online, because that's what this season is with a bunch of overpowered cars, well, you can go do that as well. There's my mini Fortnite rant for today's episode of the show. But that would do it for this first segment. Coming up in the second segment, could Pittsburgh get a big NHL event at some point over the next few years? Well, Pat and I are going to discuss that. But before we get to that, we have to tell you all about our first sponsor, and that is Game Time. It makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to NBA tip-off, and with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. You can get priority last minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute deals for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. There's also flash deals. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. There's also zone deals. Save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats for you. And all-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout, and their seat views. You can get a full view from your seat in the app before you buy the ticket. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Down the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Dam. So Pittsburgh is at least getting one big sporting event over these next couple of years. The 2026 NFL draft will be held in Pittsburgh, and this city is going to turn into an absolute zoo for that in a couple of years. But that got us thinking, when will Pittsburgh have a big NHL event like that? The city of Pittsburgh has not hosted an NHL draft since 2012, and the city has also not hosted an NHL All-Star game since 1990. That's the one that really annoys me the most. How do you have Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and Chris Letang all in the prime of their careers, and you don't even give them an NHL All-Star game in Pittsburgh? I feel like the NHL has really bungled that numerous times over the last several years. We might get to a point that these three players will retire without having an NHL All-Star game here. And I know the All-Star game is not nearly what it used to be. I kind of get bored watching part of it, but it's still an opportunity for you to showcase the city, showcase the fans, showcase everything about Pittsburgh. And for some reason, the NHL just won't give an All-Star game to Pittsburgh. So why do you think that is?
Couple thoughts on that. One, I think the time has passed for there to be another All-Star game in Pittsburgh. Like you said, it hasn't happened since 1990, back at the old then Civic Arena. And it would have been better in the first couple years of then Consol Energy Center, now PPG Paints Arena, because it was the brand new shiny toy. It was opened in 2010. You could have had it anytime, I think, between 2010 and 2014, 15, I guess, the first 5 years of the arena. But now this arena is over a decade old. It's not really the new toy anymore. Also, and this is more of a, in this, to kind of give our listeners a little bit of a tease, we're going to have a fun episode tomorrow, kind of talking about some stuff we would change about the league and the sport and all that. But I also don't think that they need to keep doing this rotating all-star game thing that they do where you have it in a bunch of different places. Everybody gets one. Mostly everybody gets one. If you want to make the NHL All-Star Game fun again, if you want to make it something that all the players go to and guys don't suddenly, oh, my hamstring's sore, I can't go to the All-Star Game this year, you can't have it in places like Pittsburgh. I love this town. I love living here. I love being from here, but it's not a destination. The NHL All-Star Game should be in Vegas, Los Angeles, New York, Tampa, or Florida, Nashville, and that's really it.
They have one going to freaking Long Island pretty soon. Give me a break.
Like, you want to have it in places that players want to go. You want to have it in places where it's not, oh God, I got to go to Ottawa, I got to go to Pittsburgh.
Do people want to go to Long Island though? I'm not trying to be mean, but come on.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, you want to have it because you look at things like the NBA All-Star Game, even the Pro Bowl a little bit. They are in destinations where people want to go, to where players want to take their families. Young players want to go because they know they can go party. Like, don't get me wrong, Carson Street's fun, but I don't think a bunch of NHL players want to go out on Carson Street after the NHL skills competition.
Okay, that's at least fair because Carson Street, I feel like here it's mainly just for a lot of college kids to people kind of around my age, to be honest. So I don't think a good chunk of NHL players would want to do that. I mean, there's still some bars downtown, but yeah, I understand your point. My counterpoint, I didn't mean to interrupt, was that 2026, the All-Star Game is going to Long Island. I don't mean to be rude, but I don't think that's like oh my God, a massive destination. I mean, would people really want to go there? I mean, sure, you got some beaches there, I guess. I don't know too much about the bar scene overall, obviously, on Long Island, but I think it's just kind of similar to, how you're talking about Pittsburgh, where, I mean, if you're going to give the Islanders an All-Star weekend and on Long Island, Belmont, you can give one to Pittsburgh. I think that's fair.
Oh, for sure. But that's just kind of my overarching point, is that if you want this to become a fun event again for the NHL, it should only be in a handful of places: Nashville, Vegas, New York City, Los Angeles, maybe even Seattle, but like bigger cities with bigger things to do and more to do in places that people want to go. Like, again, I know I'm denigrating my own hometown, but at this point, like, it's not a destination. It's fun. There are things to do, but like, the difference is too with the NFL draft is that this is going to take over the entire city. It's not just going to be Acrisure Stadium. It's going to be Acrisure Stadium. It's going to be Stage AE. It's going to be the North Shore. It's going to be the Point. It's going to be all encompassing, and you can't really do that with an All-Star game.
I mean, can you imagine what Tequila Cowboy is going to look like for the NFL draft in 2 years? I think it's going to be a zoo there. It's going to be funny.
But there is one thing I want to do before we wrap up this segment.
Go ahead.
I said I was going to do this before we hit record. Luckily, I don't think you've cheated. I hope not. But as Hunter said, 2012 NHL entry draft was held at Consol Energy Center. And here's a fun fact I looked up before we started. In the first round of the 2012 NHL draft, there were 7 players selected, all of whom have played for the Penguins. Can you name them?
I'm gonna try my best. So obviously Derek Pouliot. That's the easiest one. I believe Alex Galchenyuk is another.
That's another.
Oli Mata, if I recall correctly, was in the 2012 NHL draft.
You are 3 for 3.
Cody Ceci was in there as well.
4 for 4.
So
you got 3 left. And when I first looked this up, I thought it was 6, and then I missed a name, but it's 7.
4. I'm trying to think. Man, this is tough. So I got 4 of them so far. I want to say another is Mike Matheson.
There you go.
It's 5.
So you got 2 to go, and it is 2 forwards. That's the hint that I will give you.
Tanner
I'm hoping
Pearson.
People are screaming at their radio right now that know
Tanner
it.
Pearson. I remember
there you
he was in that
go.
draft.
You got 1 more.
I forget the other one.
The last one, taken 21st overall by the Calgary Flames, Mark Jankowski.
Oh my God. I totally forgot that he was honestly a member of the Penguins a couple years ago. That's just how ineffective he was in the bottom six.
But yeah, I mean, that was something that even like I didn't know until today. We were getting ready for the show, doing our prep, and I would pulled up the 2012 NHL draft because I wanted to rant about Philip Forsberg still being available when the Penguins ultimately took Derek Pouliot at 8. And then I was like, wait a minute, there is a laundry list of former Penguins on this first round that have played for the team.
I'm glad I was able to get most of them. I knew I was gonna mess up at least one. I'm actually surprised I got 6, to be honest.
Yeah, that was a great effort.
I tried. I try at least, but I think that'll do it for this second segment of today's show. Coming up in the final segment, Pat and I are going to discuss the NHL's conference finals and how both of these series are must watch for every NHL fan. That's coming up right after this. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Dam. So both Oilers Stars and Rangers Panthers are tied 2-2 in their respective series. They're going at least 6 games, but I'm hoping that we get 7 games for both of these series just because that's how slim the margins are between these 4 teams. Any one of these 4 teams can win the Stanley Cup at this point. I would not be surprised if any of them win, just based on the way they've played overall. The Oilers in particular have really surprised me in this series, especially with the way they've defended. They've done a great job on the Stars forwards. They've done a great job on Heiskanen. They've also done a really good job getting to Jake Ottinger's kitchen, especially in game 4. He had a really bad game after the Stars went up 2-0, and Ottinger's going to really have to bounce back in game 5 in Dallas. But I'm just liking the style the Oilers play. McDavid's been all over the ice. You saw Draisaitl wake up in game 4. Bouchard is starting to cook a little bit more after being great in the first 2 rounds. I think he was limited a little bit in the first 3 games. Hyman's been great, but they're also getting depth scoring. When you're getting goals from McLeod, Matthias Janmark of all people in 2024, you're doing something right. And the Oilers' depth has been really able to help out the star talent, and that's a major reason why this series is tied right now. They're giving the Stars one heck of a fight.
Well, and I got to give full marks to head coach Chris Knobloch, because when they hinted in the lead up to the game that he was going to make a bunch of lineup changes going into that game, it looked like a panic move. It looked like, oh God, they are out of answers. They're going to already throw their Hail Mary, only being down 2-1 in the series. And what do you know? It worked. 5 unanswered to win that game. And that is just the case of, I don't know if I'm ready to call him one of the better coaches in the NHL or if he's just on a hot streak, but that's a guy who's feeling himself. He is making tough decisions with the lineup and he's pushing all the right buttons, because before game 4, there was a real talk that maybe the Oilers are cooked, and maybe not even so much that the Oilers are cooked. There was a great piece in The Athletic about the Dallas Stars that kind of talked about their fine line between confidence and arrogance, but they have just been this team all playoff long to where no matter the circumstance, no matter the game, no matter the result, they think they are right there. They think they are the team. And it looked like that was going to continue in the first period of last night's game. And then Edmonton woke up.
The Stars were dominating them in those first 10 minutes. I mean, they go up 2-0. Skinner does not look good. He looks really shaky. He looks really nervous. The broadcast actually cut to a fan who was like, nope, get him out of there, please. But I like how Chris Knobloch was like, you know what? I'm going to calm everyone down. I'm not going to pull Skinner for the backup. And he kept him in. And again, he calmed the team down. And they were able to go full pedal to the metal and dominate the Stars for the final 50 minutes. That was a really nice performance from the Oilers. And now it's a best of 3. Stars have home ice, but that really hasn't mattered that much in this series so far. As for Panthers Rangers, I'll say this. I think the Panthers have been the better team in 3 of the 4 games in this series. I think the Rangers, in a way, are a little bit lucky to be tied 2-2 right now, but that also can happen when you have the best goaltender on the planet, and the Rangers do right now, in Igor Shesterkin. He is, I think, the biggest reason why this series is tied 2-2 right now. The saves that he made in game 3 to help the Rangers steal one at Sunrise was spectacular, especially in the third period. He was trying to do that again in game 4, and I had the thought going into overtime, oh my God, the Rangers are going to do this again. They're going to continue to have that vibe of a team of destiny, but the Panthers get a power play, and Sam Reinhart gets the game-winning goal to send this series back to MSG tied. But I'll say this for the Rangers. They're getting the contribution from Shesterkin. They're getting goals from Barclay Goodrow, of all people, who didn't even have 6 goals during the regular season. They're getting a goal from Alexander Wenberg, who I think has been a decent acquisition. But they still need to get their big dogs rolling. Zibanejad's been a ghost. Panarin, he hasn't been as much of a ghost, but he still needs to be better. Chris Kreider's got to be better. I loved what Matthew Tkachuk said about how him throwing his mouth guard was the best thing he did all game in game 4. And he's not wrong, but how do you respond from that? How are you going to come back from that on your home ice in game 5 on Thursday night? I'm going to be watching that for sure, but I think it's past time for the Rangers big dogs to show up, because I'm not sure they can win 2 more games in this series if it's just a couple of depth players, including Alexei Lafreniere and Igor Shesterkin, just showing up against Florida's big dogs.
Yeah, you beat me to it, because that's what I was going to say about this series. The Rangers are still in it because, yes, they stole game 3 because of a marvelous performance from Shesterkin, and they have been buoyed by him being great and their depth players stepping up. But we all know, like, yes, you need your depth players to step up, but they need to be a supplement to your big guns carrying the load. And Florida's big guns have been all over this series. They have put their mark squarely on this series. Meanwhile, not a lot from Zibanejad, not a lot from Panarin, not a lot from Kreider, not a lot from Adam Fox. And maybe they can steal the series because of Shesterkin, but given the way the first 4 games have played out in the type of hockey the Florida Panthers make you play, that is a serious roll of the dice. And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities that they could steal the series without their big guns coming up big for them, but it's highly unlikely. So for the Rangers to put the Panthers on the brink tonight, the big guys have to show up tonight, or it could be a real chance that the President's Trophy winners are out in 6.
And I know this is very obvious, but the Rangers need a lot more offensive zone time. It can't just be one and done. You're dumping it in from the red line, because that's what it was. It felt like for 40 minutes of game 4 in Sunrise. The Rangers really couldn't get anything going in the offensive zone. It felt like they had only 1 or 2 chances in the third period, and that was it. They need to actually get their cycle game going. They need to dump and chase a little bit more. And I know that kind of goes against what the Rangers' philosophy is. They like scoring in transition. They like these kind of plays in the offensive zone where they score on like their 1 or 2 chances, but they got to get their forecheck going if they really want to win this series. And that does start with the big dogs overall. So game 5 tonight. Oh, go ahead.
One last thing on the series. That's the other thing about what you were just saying is the way the Rangers are playing, at least in my estimation, is a little unsustainable, because everyone's talking about shot attempts and everything that Florida's doing. Here's the flip side of that, where, you know, because everybody points at game 3 and goes, oh, shot attempts, LOL, they got the win, who cares? Rangers are blocking a lot of shots. Rangers are spending a lot of time in their defensive zone. You get to games 6 and 7 playing that kind of hockey, they are going to be dog tired. And that is going to open the door for Florida. So there has to be pushback from the Rangers, or even if they push this thing to 6 and 7, their defenders and their depth players are going to be exhausted.
Agreed. Yeah, I don't think I can disagree with any of that, but I think that will do it for this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to / watch this one. Pat and I will be back with another show for you all on Friday. And yes, it's going to be a fun type of episode to end your week this week and to close out the month of May. And don't worry, my friends, I think June, it's going to start getting at least a little bit busier for Penguins news overall. But that'll do it again for this episode. Thank you all so much for listening / watching. For Patrick Damp, I am Hunter Hodes. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We'll talk with you all on Friday.